So did you all see that I was quoted in the Bee today?
Yeah, you went golfing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was quoted as a Twitter user for referring to the fact that the county is allowing people to golf but not do basically any other sport. Classist. The word they used, the quoted, was classist, but they didn't use fuckery. So I was a little bummed about that.
Yeah.
Fuckers.
Yeah. Normally the Bee's a lot better about that sort of
Yeah.
those raw takes.
But so I don't know if you follow me on Twitter, you've seen that I've gone full on Karen mode on this golf course thing. And
Dave is demanding to speak to the manager.
I want to speak to the county's manager. Yes.
I love it. You
That's
go
so good.
full Karen on them, Dave. That's what I
Thank
want to
you.
see.
I'm
Full
Yes.
Karen.
I'm like neighborhood association Karen. I'm like taking pictures of golfers as they
I
like
love
walk
this.
together and like hand each other their golf clubs. And then like the
I love it.
CDC put out new numbers today saying that the transmission rate of coronavirus is like double what they thought it was. And I sent that to the county too. And I'm like, will you please show this to them and, maybe rethink this golf course thing.
I love that you've made it your personal mission.
Yeah, it's good.
That's great.
The other side of this, have you considered that, like, we're probably only months away from you having enough hair to like cut it into like a bob, like a soccer mom kind of bob, so that when you're asking to speak to the manager, you got the look down too.
Yes.
I don't like, yes, I want that. But I think the most advanced I am at cutting hair would be throwing a bowl on my head and shaving around it. So I don't know.
I think
I'm
it's
here
similar.
for that.
Right? I mean, I'm not a
I love a bowl
hairstylist,
cut.
but I feel like if you just tilt the bowl backwards like a little bit and go for
Oh,
it.
shit. You love to think about it.
I'm thinking about it right now, and I got to tell you, I'm loving it.
I mean, but don't take advice from me because I've been trying to convince Tareen that I could totally taper his hair and he's not going for it. But I found an image online that shows me what guards should be open and closed. And I'm like, let me try this. The worst that can happen is like, you grow your hair out for a couple of weeks and it's fine. We're not going anywhere. But
Come on,
so
Tareen.
I say, try it. Go for it.
So what's he doing? What's his plan with his hair?
His plan is to go full Beverly Hills Cop and just have an edge with no taper. Just like let it bang. That's his plan.
You notice it earliest with men, I think, during this during the quarantine, because like we have to get a haircut like 3 to 4 weeks.
Yeah, it's because in like 1
Max,
month, my hair is literally twice as long as it was the month before.
I gotta say, every time we get on here to record a new show, I am most excited about seeing the volume that Skylar and Kempa bring. It's it's special.
Wait till
Another thing I love to think about.
Wait till you see my bob/bowl cut.
Oh, I can't wait. That's, I mean, you know what? We're in a time when there's not a whole lot to look forward to, but Kemp is Bob. Kemp is like a cut or whatever that is called. That's what I'm looking forward to.
You bringing us those rays of hope, and I love it.
Yeah, I'll be serving looks.
All right, guys. Well, you guys want to get started up?
All right.
I would love to.
Do it.
Let's ride.
Voices, the things they said. Voices, some from those dead. All the voices heard. Voices, things we say. Voices, they're in your head. All the voices heard.
Hello, everyone. You have Kempa.
And Skylar.
And Shannon.
And Flo.
And Flo.
And Flo.
I love Flo's. I love that. And
back.
Flo.
By popular demand.
With the working headset.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you get like a new like hardware, or is it just magically working?
It's I mean, I'd like to say it wasn't, user error, but it was probably user error.
Well, I'm glad the user has been debugged.
Yes, correct.
And so we actually have a special guest tonight in a well-known housing advocate from Sacramento, Michelle Pariset. Michelle, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, of course. We've certainly spoken about you in the past and how you are such a good faith person in this fight.
Yeah, I think if I'm remembering correctly, the first episode that we did together was Bad Faith Daryl, which was directly about the whole fiasco.
Correct.
Yeah. Of which Michelle was kind of more or less the ringleader on the good side of things.
Well, we don't need to dive into that much if you don't want to. Okay, fine. But why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, kind of what you do, and like why housing renters' rights has been such a passion for you.
Sure. So my day job, I work as a policy advocate for Public Advocates, which is a civil rights law firm. My role there is mostly to do legislative advocacy around housing. So working for tenant protections, for good land use policy, stuff like that. I'm also a board member of the Sacramento Housing Alliance, a board member of Organized Sacramento, and an executive board member of the California Democratic Party. And I've recently been elected as a member of the Sacramento Central Committee. So lots of hats. And being quarantined means I don't go to a lot of meetings. So I have lots of time for podcasts. Thank you for having me on.
All right, perfect.
Well, everyone else's loss is our gain.
That's right.
So can you talk a bit about, I guess let's just dive right into it. Obviously, we are living in the coronavirus pandemic. We're all enduring it. We're all trying to understand day to day what this new reality is for each of us. And I think from the housing side of things, there's just so much going on so fast. So, there was this article that came out in the Wall Street Journal saying that almost 1 out of every 3 apartment renters in the U.S. did not pay their rent on time in April.
Right.
What does that mean? When do we panic?
So let me pan out a bit onto employment. Onto unemployment numbers, because I think that has a huge role to play in the numbers we're going to see for evictions, right? So in California, we're looking at almost 2.5 million people who have filed for unemployment in the last 4 weeks. That is an exceptional number. That Wall Street Journal article cites the 70% of folks could pay their rent. And the title is a little, isn't exactly accurate, because for April 1st of last year, about 20% of people didn't pay their rent on the 1st.
Right, I noticed that,
The best circumstances. The best circumstances, our economy is booming, unemployment is crazy low. 1 in 5 renter households can't pay their rent on the 1st. That's where we were last year. So this year, this month, we're up 13%, right? Which gets us to that 70% number. On May 1st, I predict millions of people are not going to be able to pay their rent.
Yeah.
And unemployment is going to keep getting worse. Right now in California, that 2.5 million number, that's slightly over 10% of our total workforce lost their job in the last month.
Wow.
And the state has been doing a variety of really confusing things, right? So we had the governor's first executive order which essentially punted to the local jurisdictions the ability to create eviction moratoriums. And that wasn't great, right? Because then we get a patchwork of protections across the state in those places that are progressive enough to think that their tenants need help, right?
Right.
And under the best of circumstances, advocates have a really hard time doing this piecemeal across jurisdictions. We see it. We have the same problem with rent control or with just cause protections, right? And so we kept advocating at the state for a holistic statewide eviction moratorium. And then we got the governor's second executive order, which was frankly a hot mess. And we kept advocating because we had to. And then we got the Judicial Council rulemaking from Monday, right? Which feels like a month ago, but was like 2 days.
Yeah, it really does.
So what the Judicial Council rulemaking says is that until 90 days after the state of emergency has been declared ended, tenants cannot be evicted. So what that practically means is that a landlord can give a tenant a 3-day pay or quit, and then they can go to the court and try to file, for their unlawful detainer, but the court will not respond. They won't send the 5-day notice to the tenant. That the eviction process does not move forward. And that's great. So that's great for while we are in this crisis, nobody's kind of kicked out, ideally, right? However, at the end of those 90 days, there's nothing in the Judicial Council rulemaking or anything that's been done at the state level so far that says that landlords have to take late rent. We could just be pushing back all of these evictions, till 6 months from now, when there will be a tidal wave.
A wash, yeah.
Eviction. So there's still so much work to be done to protect tenants.
When we look at, first of all, the potential of how long we could all be stuck in our homes, right? Californians are doing what they should be doing, right? We're flattening the curve, but we know that when we flatten the curve, that also means we widen the curve, which means that we could be in our homes for much longer than people originally thought. Now, they can put like a pause on, paying your rent, but month after month after month, when you start to think about, even if we did, even went through June, July, whatever, saying you don't have to pay it yet until the end of July or whatever, that could be like 4 months of these, low-income earners that have to pay back 4 months of rent, as soon as they start getting back to work. And doesn't that sort of just like paints a picture of an entire class of Californians that will be deeper in debt to either their landlords or, to the banks. Well, first of all, what's the answer? And second of all, if the answer is full on rent doesn't exist, mortgages don't exist, how realistic is it to make that a reality?
So right now, we have a huge challenge, which is to protect people at scale, right? Millions of people. We need to protect them because it's not just the COVID crisis, right? It's what's going to come after, which some people say could be the second Great Depression, right? So if low wage workers, low income folks, come to the end of the COVID crisis in massive debt, still don't have jobs, the economy is depressed, how are they going to pay this back, right? So I think we're operating in a mindset. First, capitalism doesn't have any solutions for this crisis. Everything good that's going to happen in our communities in the next several months is straight up socialism. I just want everybody to know that when we talk about, helping people with housing and helping people with, health insurance, and that's none of this is capitalism.
Right.
That's
and
what we like to hear on this show.
Yeah. So we're in a battle of really big ideas right now. You know, we're talking about healthcare for all. We're talking about rent and mortgage moratoriums for the duration. You know, we're talking about help for everyone, for our undocumented community, for folks experiencing homelessness, everybody in, nobody out, right? So that's my view of the world, and most of the organizations that I work with, that's their view of the world too. So what do we do about rent and mortgages? We need a rent and mortgage moratorium. And I say mortgages because when folks don't get rent money, they also can't pay their mortgages after a time. You know, there's some big, Blackstones of the world or Invitation Homes or whoever, right? You know, maybe they can go for a few months without rent. But, you know, mom and pop landlords and renters are often at odds. But in this, they're together, I think, because if you can't pay rent, you can't pay your mortgage, and we need to take care of everybody, as many people as we can. Like, solidarity is going to be really important in this moment. And instead of everybody throwing each other under the bus, you know, we should be thinking about how we help everyone. And I think in this, we cancel rent and mortgage for the duration, so we all don't get to the end of this in debt up to our eyeballs, right?
Right.
You say moratorium. Can you say exactly what that means for the listeners?
So for me, what does that mean? How am I using that word? We don't pay rent. We don't pay mortgage.
They don't exist. X, Y,
right.
Z.
There's
month.
no bill coming when this thing is over.
There's no bill coming.
Right.
There's nobody owes, right? So, for example, if I own income property, you know, say I have a duplex. My tenants don't pay rent, and I don't pay mortgage on that duplex until the end of the emergency, right? Or however we decide to do it.
And you're all protected and able to shelter in place like you've been mandated to do.
Right.
And Michelle, can you explain how that would work? Because I think a lot of people are really confused. When you sit here moratorium, it's like, okay, so then doesn't that negatively impact somebody? How does this work? You know, people have lots of questions.
It does. Right. So in the way that mortgages work, it does. You know, so tenants aren't getting paid, right? They're out of work. They can't pay rent. Landlords can't pay mortgage. So now we're at the banks.
Right.
You know, banks aren't people. Banks aren't people. You know, I heard about a cheesecake factory sending a letter to their landlord telling them they weren't going to pay rent.
Right.
You know, and
Subway did that too. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. It's not possible to pay rent right now. And, you know, I think that the billionaires who profit from our economy, they're going to get bailed out. That's the thing. Like, we're going to have giant bailouts of sectors in our economy.
We already have.
Right.
We've already thrown trillions of dollars.
So many more, right? There's so many more coming. I think that's how, you know, we get this handled. I'm not an economist. I just give a shit about people. So I think we can do it. It's within the police powers of the state, and it's something we can do.
From
my organization.
Sorry for interrupting. I think my follow-up earlier to that was, okay, I think all of us on this show are in agreement with you. Is it realistic politically? Could we sway a Gavin Newsom or a California legislature or whoever we need to sway to make that happen?
So I think right now we have not been convincing the governor. To his credit, he's under enormous pressure. And I think that he believes that the changes we've made to unemployment are going to help people pay rent, to keep the system running to keep the gas in the machine, right? But I don't think he understands is that, people already were struggling to pay their rent.
Right.
Right.
So now you're making less money on unemployment, and you've got some choices to make about food, right? Your kids are home, maybe. We're in this crisis right now, and I don't know that the governor understands exactly how people are living already, like before COVID. But I think he's going to start to understand because 2.5 million people are on unemployment in this state.
That's what I was just going to say. It's not. Oh, I'm sorry. Finish it. No. We can't even get checks out to people, right? People are calling into to EDD, and they can't get through the process. When we were promised that independent contractors were going to be able to file for unemployment, that is not happening yet. We don't even have a system for that. I heard today that the extra $600 coming from the feds is going to start being distributed on Sunday with the next round of checks. So that's helpful to people. But I think what the administration is thinking right now is all of these changes to unemployment are going to help people be able to pay their rent. But there are so many people in the informal economy who do not qualify for unemployment insurance, who aren't going to be able to get any help. The lady who lives down the street from me, she cleans houses in the neighborhood for a living, right? I pay her, $120 a month to clean my house twice a week. And she can't come into my house right now. She can't leave her house. She can't clean houses anywhere in the neighborhood. She can't file for unemployment.
Right.
So what's she going to do?
Flo, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I do have my hand up. Michelle, you've raised some really interesting points about banks not being people. And I'm really thinking about our neighbors to the north who have done a lot more than we have in terms of financial protections for folks, right? I think they're doing something like $2,000 a month, over time, right? Instead of this $1,200 per person that we're giving out in the U.S. And so I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on, infusing the cash aid in. And I guess I'll bring up the counterpoint to that. Dave and I have a friend who frequently says, the problem with this, though, is that we have landlords who've been jacking up rents to make money for a very long time. And so we're just kind of feeding the beast. And so does that make sense? So I'm really curious to know your thoughts on, versus a moratorium, doing a cash infusion, and what are the pros and cons of that?
So the cash infusion is, I think that's a great idea, right? It's basically a universal basic income in Canada of $2,000 right a month now. We got to $1,200, I don't know, or 14 or whatever it is. We got to that number because that's 4 weeks of full-time minimum wage work, a one-time payment of that, right? So it's nothing. Right. Especially if you live in a coastal city in California, if you live in California at all, like that's not.
Right. If you live anywhere that's not like rural Wyoming.
Right. It's total bullshit.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
So we can keep paying into the system. So the money that we cause to flow through the system keeps the existing system running. So if you're giving everybody $1,200, even if you're giving everybody $1,200 a month to help pay their rent, basically what you're doing is making a $1,200 a month payment to a landlord. So you're like making sure that the system keeps going. Like something that we've been thinking about in the housing policy area, when we're not like scrambling and freaking out right now, is what happens at the end of this? Like, how do we reimagine this system? When we've been talking about it in terms of buyouts, not bailouts, right? In my ideal world, like all of these folks who have like tons of income property or whatever, I would like to see our jurisdictions purchase all of that income property. So at the end, when a landlord's like, oh, I'm underwater by thousands and thousands of dollars because my tenants couldn't pay rent, the state or a county or a city could say, well, that sucks. We're going to help you get whole. But the price for that is maybe we do a deed restriction on your property so that it's always, reserved for low-income people, or the state buys it and puts it in local land trusts or something, right? I don't want to see it like we did in 2008, where we just dump money into the real estate industry, and all we get is consolidation of the rental housing market in the hands of a few, who then own us wholesale. They can do whatever they want in our communities. And so I really want to think creatively about how we come out of the other side of this with a whole new rental housing scheme. I don't really want to say market, because I don't want it to be a market, right? We need to hold a lot more housing as social housing.
Right. Absolutely. Well, I think one of the things that's like kind of inspiring, or maybe inspiring is the wrong word, but like, this isn't a bunch of renters being like, hey, this is how things should be. Or like, hey, like, it's like what it normally is, right? Is a bunch of people who are making minimum wage or close to it being like, look, I'm having a really hard time paying the exorbitant rents I'm paying and paying for all the rest of my life and my living expenses, right? And that's easier for landlords and therefore somebody like Newsom to be like, oh yeah, that's a really sad story. What's next? I'm not really that interested in this, right? They can pay lip service to it, but not do it. Well, that's very different than a situation like you're describing on like a May 1st, where all of a sudden like 60% of renters just straight up are like, look, I want to pay rent, but I don't have any money, then that's May 1st, right? I mean, and we don't know how long this thing is going to go. So if we're looking at June and then July and then August, it's not even like, oh, we should figure out something for people who are renting. This is a crisis that is affecting everybody all the way up to the banks. And when those guys' bottom lines start getting fucking threatened, I guarantee you're going to see Newsom coming out with some fucking solutions to this shit, right?
Yeah. This is like kind of one of those moments where everything is in crisis, and so some big seismic change can happen. And this seems like an opportunity, I think, for a lot of socialists to say, here's the selling point on our policies, and this can save lives. Can I switch it? Can I ask Flo a question, actually? We've a lot of the focus on the public health perspective in the last week has been, and we kind of started ahead of the state in talking about this, was mental health. What sort of effects can, something like this, where folks are accruing more and more debt while they're in their home and not allowed to leave their home, what sort of effects does that have on them when they, even though they're in their house for now and are told they have to stay in their house, they start feeling more and more housing insecure?
Absolutely. I mean, we first of all, we know that, despite the fact that our payer systems separate out our teeth and our eyes and our heads from the rest of our body, that they all integrate as one system, right? And so we know that when we are stressed about what's happening around us, that it has a major impact on our physical health and our emotional health and our spiritual health. And so, yeah, people are at home and are feeling incredibly stressed, and are in a position where there's very little control. And the one thing human beings are not good at is being faced with uncertainty. We do, in many instances, a lot better when we know something horrible is coming than when we're not quite sure if it's going to happen and what comes next. And so right now we've done that with our physical health. We've done that with our financial well-being and stability. And it's terrifying for people. And we're seeing that level of stress happening at all levels of society. The big things that we've seen that are up right now are calls to the suicide hotline. Sacramento just experienced two deaths by suicide in Twin Rivers and Natomas Unified School District. Two separate incidents, but certainly probably similar root causes. And the other thing we're seeing a big increase in is also domestic violence. And so recognizing the dangers of sheltering in place with potentially an abuser, we also know that for domestic violence, one of the risk factors is having an unemployed spouse. So we've just taken all of these people, told them don't leave their homes, and essentially are housing them with people who we know are more dangerous because they are unemployed also. So this is going to have some really damaging and lasting effects, not only on the economy and the sort of big picture things we've been talking about, but also on people's lived experiences. And I'm actually concerned about our safety beyond just infection control. I'm also concerned about our emotional and social and physical well-being.
Yeah.
Shannon, you had your hand up.
Yeah, my question is going back to talking about housing and rents. I've been thinking a lot about what happens. So Michelle knows this well. We've got our rent caps with the 10% rent cap every year, right? So right now we're in a situation where people can't pay rent, but in 6 months, my landlord can raise my rent 10%. I guess I'm just asking what thoughts are around that in terms of like policies to protect people from rent hikes that may happen either during the crisis or immediately following that fall within that 10% for Sacramento anyway, that fall within that bracket.
Yeah, so there are a few layers of rent increase protection that folks have right now. So I worked on AB 1482 last year. So the statewide rent cap is CPI plus 5%, which I doubt our economy is going to be growing that much this year. So CPI is going to be pretty low. And that's once a year, and that is not ideal at all, right? That's still, my wages aren't going up 5, 8, 10% a year. Most people's aren't. But so 1482 protects people as like a stopgap, right? Because what we were seeing was like 40, 50, 60% rent increases. So it's not ideal, but it stops kind of like the worst of those increases. So what we need is real rent control. It would be great if that was statewide. We're going to have an opportunity, hopefully, to vote for that here in Sacramento. But landlords, the real estate industry is really good at controlling the power, right? They're great at, and you all talked about this, how they, fund electoral campaigns. From the time these folks are like running for dog catcher, right? The realtors are in there,
right,
building that relationship. And by the time they're in the legislature, I heard Gavin Newsom say in a meeting once that when we were negotiating 1482, that he had a long relationship with the realtors and that by every practical measure, there was no light between them on almost every issue. And while we were negotiating 1482, he opened the realtors like lobby day. They had a big tent on the lawn with several hundred realtors in it, and the governor is out there giving like opening remarks. Like that's how tight the real estate industry is with government, right? So
These guys are just like full on. I mean, this is my opinion, everyone. Full on evil, like CREPAC, the real estate PAC, and then the apartment association, the landlords. The decisions they make and the things they lobby for sometimes feel just profoundly unconscionable.
It's cruel. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And my concern is like, I don't think Gavin. Sorry, I just want to say, I don't think Gavin is necessarily a bad person, but he's worth $20 million and he just full on doesn't understand what it feels like to be a renter, what it feels like to live paycheck to paycheck and how much money you need, right? To them, maybe $1,200 is enough, right? It's like that Arrested Development quote where it's like, oh, come on, Michael, how much can a banana cost? $20? Like they just have no idea.
Right.
Yeah, and to Michelle's point, like, he didn't know that before shit hit the fan, right? Like, his disconnection, he was disconnected from that prior to this crisis, and now we're in a situation where people, like, it's a whole new ball game, and the gap is even further between his lived experience and the experience of the majority of the people that he's leading in this state, right? Like, and that really, it puts us in a situation where people are just further and further at risk, and the commodification of housing is fucked.
A lot of our elected officials have never lived in poverty. We have some folks that represent us that have, and
shout out to Holly Mitchell.
Oh God, I love her so much.
I know.
So a lot of folks don't have that lived experience. You know, they've never been a tenant. They've never been homeless. I was homeless as a kid. My family and I lived in, shitty hotel rooms on county vouchers. So I know what that's like. But a lot of folks, don't have that experience. And to your point, Dave, the $20 banana is a great example because, and I think something like a third of our state legislature are landlords. But yeah. I don't think that we should say that folks are
Brendan
evil,
has 4 units that he rents out, right?
Yeah. I think it lets people off the hook to say, oh, they're just evil. They can never understand, because they can't understand. Because they have parents who maybe are living in, affordable housing, or their kids can't afford to move out. Like, they have the capacity to understand. I don't think anybody would doubt that, like, my commitment to tenants or this work, and I'm a landlord.
You're one of them.
1 unit. I am, but I'm not evil.
Lock her
if my tenant can't pay rent, I'm not gonna. If he loses his job, I'm not gonna throw him out. Like, I would never do that in a million years, But I'm also in a position financially where I can not collect rent and still be fine.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think especially when we're talking about small landlords, we don't let them off the hook by calling them evil. We have to get them on our side because we need them on our side.
But Michelle, you also bring up an interesting point, because I think sometimes we talk about, people's lived experience and, them not having ever rented or having ever been, lived paycheck to paycheck, or, been unemployed in a place where you didn't have an ability to pay. But I think it's even bigger than that. I think sometimes it's also who your social network is. So if you've never been in that position and nobody has been in that position, it's very hard for you to even keep on your radar those experiences, right? And for that to feel, valid to you, right? In the same way that it's really hard for somebody who lives in an all-white town in the middle of, wherever, to think about racial issues because it's not something they confront. They don't know anybody, and it doesn't feel top of mind in terms of the things that are affecting your day-to-day life. And I think that's probably more of the concern than just what was your own lived experience. It's the fact that you don't have anybody around you to build that empathy or build that understanding of the experience, and you're legislating. So we talk, sometimes we refer to it in public health as the granite countertops issue. And I think I've mentioned this before, of people who have granite countertops are often the ones making decisions. And the challenge is most people don't have granite countertops because they're freaking expensive. So it's just a world away when you can't even think about taking things out of the oven in the same way that everybody else does because you have granite countertops.
Right.
Yeah, and if you're living in a space right now where you look at the landscape of your social support and you see no one who is potentially struggling, or thinking about the day that they are going to struggle as a result of this, it's time to just recenter your life, because this shit is fucking real for everyone. Everyone I know. I don't know anyone who's okay right now.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We're all either now or very soon in the future going to have to really think about what comes next.
So let's talk about,
well, except for the people with millions and billions of dollars, they're not thinking about that. But
yeah, we don't.
Let's
we don't
talk
the rest
about-
of us are.
Let's talk about what comes next. Michelle, what is it that you and other housing advocates are fighting for, down at the Capitol and with the legislators and with the governor? And follow-up to that is, what can listeners do to help?
Right. So my organization, Public Advocates, is on the coordinating committee of Housing Now, which is, I think, now like the largest coalition of housing groups and interested organizations in the state. So I think we're at like 140 organizations. They include labor, tenant organizing, policy groups, all kinds of groups. And we have put out a list of demands, which include eviction and foreclosure moratoria, rent and mortgage moratoriums, an end to utility shutoffs, and an end to sweeps on camps where people experiencing homelessness are living, and to stop harassing them and to get them into housing as quickly as possible. We've had some success with those demands, especially with utility shutoffs and now with the eviction moratorium. But what we really need is that pause on rents and mortgages to stop the tsunami of evictions and foreclosures that we anticipate we will see at the end of this crisis. And it's really hard to do anything in the legislature right now because we're on recess. The recess was extended to March 4th, and I imagine, or May 4th, and I imagine it will go on much longer than that. They have to come back at some point to deal with the budget. That's a constitutional requirement by the middle of June. We're hearing that if your ask doesn't have something to do with homelessness, wildfires, or COVID, that you should put that away for this year, and we'll get to that next year, or maybe in special session in August. So the advocacy that we're doing right now is on the phone with staffers who we get to answer our phone calls, and we tried to do, for example, we tried to do a call into the governor's switchboard, and they turned it off. We're doing these sign-on letters and things like that, but there's only so much we can do because our tactics, right, in organizing are like, we're going to put 1,000 people in your hallway and chant all day, and you're going to have to pay attention to us, right? Or like last year, we had folks led by ACE, the Alliance of Californians for Community Empowerment, that took the governor's office and stayed there all night, right? So these tactics are things that we can't do right now. So what we can do is call and talk to a lot of people and just try and keep on folks. We're hearing that anything that moves is going to have to move as part of the budget, as a trailer bill or something like that. And as folks, as an organization who's always been concerned with the general public's ability to engage in state level policymaking, that I really don't like the idea that all of this policy is going to get done in a budget trailer bill, because there isn't the transparency that we would like to see, and there's not the opportunity for input. But that might be where it happens, and we need help. We need help from our legislators to push our policies forward. I'm hoping that some of these legislators start thinking more radically about what the options are and what we can do. Because when we were fighting about 1482 last year, that was a big lift. Nobody thought that was going to happen. Yeah. But it was a really big lift, right? And that was going pretty far out for most of those legislators to be able to vote for a bill like that. So when we come in asking for rent and mortgage moratoriums, I hope that they can see the level of the crisis and pitch in to help their constituents.
When I I talk whenever you talk to people about particular legislators, particularly like their favorite legislator, they always say like, oh, secretly this person is like really wildly radical, like a full on like, anarchist or whatever. But then when the rubber hits the road, like, we get what we have at our Capitol. So this, for those legislators, hopefully is a chance for them to actually prove that and prove that this is a time where seismic changes can happen again. I already said this, but it's worth repeating. Big, like profound changes in the way we view our universe are possible right now. Did you say what listeners could do to help you out?
So what listeners can do to help out is to be contacting every elected official that represents you, from your city council member to your mayor, to your board of supervisors, to your assembly member, your state senator, calling the governor. There's a variety of, I don't know if I can give you all some information, if you can post it when you, but there's
Absolutely.
letters you can sign on to. There's organizing efforts you can get involved with. Call your local tenants union, the Sacramento Tenants Union, get involved with them, get involved with ACE, get involved with DSA, like organize. And that's how we're going to win. Because we need to create, all of these folks right now are experiencing something. There's not a lot of things that bind all of us as Americans.
Right.
But right now, crisis is one of them, and not being able to pay the rent is going to be one of them. When there are millions of people who can't pay the rent, like those folks' self-interest is bound now. And if we organize them, I think we can make some movement happen.
Love it.
And also having people lose their health insurance during a pandemic, right?
I was going to say that.
If that's not the thing that tells you we need our health insurance not to be tied to our employment, I don't know what is. Because people are currently unemployed because of the pandemic. But the thing a pandemic does is likely put our physical health in jeopardy.
Risk, right.
So, like, it just doesn't make sense.
There's so many things like that this entire episode is laying bare, that we just like are operating on this house of cards that is super fucking flimsy, and like,
Right.
and the bottom just got knocked out and we are starting to tumble, and everybody can see it. It is not a partisan issue. Any idiot can be like, oh wait, we're laid off because of a pandemic and we all just lost our health care. This is not a fucking sustainable system, like anybody can see it. It is the time not only to like get involved yourself, but to talk to your friends. Like that's what organizing is about. Talk to the people around you, like who are suffering and who are angry and who like want to do stuff. And yeah, like Michelle was saying, there's a million places to put that energy into that are super helpful.
It's about forming community, and it's about taking care of each other. Did anybody else have any more questions for Michelle? All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us on this. This is obviously, housing is the sister issue of, and housing rights and renters' rights, the sister issue of homelessness. And we discuss homelessness regularly on here, and it's really nice to add that element and add that whole dimension to what it is we're trying to do and how we're trying to help folks.
Totally.
Should we discuss real briefly? Will you stick around with us through the end of this? We just got a few more minutes.
Sounds great.
Great. So today, it was just, I believe if it was Teresa Clift who reported on this. They need to start calling it the Sacramento Tea, because she writes that paper now.
That's so good. Yes.
But she, so there have been 2 confirmed cases of coronavirus with Sacramento County residents experiencing homelessness. My understanding is the only reason that we actually know that is because these 2 have actually been hospitalized. Should we throw this one to Shannon? I mean, you're somebody who serves this community every day. kind of what's your reflection on that, and you know, I guess just go from there.
Yeah, my immediate reflection upon reading the news when it broke was like, fuck. We knew it was going to happen. And so that, like, I think I've reached a point where I knew that this was going to hit the community that I serve. It was just a matter of time, right? I think really where my, like, frustration and like anger comes from is that we could have done more for people experiencing homelessness. We could have moved faster. We could have gotten folks, those like the incredibly vulnerable folks inside, and potentially curbed this a little bit. You know, I don't know who the folks are. I know that there's been some difficulty in identifying who the folks are. We don't know if they were experiencing, if they were living in camps, if they were living in shelters. We don't know a lot about them. And so an additional part of my, I guess, like, as you said, Kempa, reflection is like, where were these folks and who were they in contact with? And as a frontline worker, does this mean that this is the start of the snowball effect in the community that I am seeing every day?
Yeah.
Or is this because the folks that I'm seeing every day are people who are street homeless, so they're living in encampments, or is this the beginning of the snowball effect of folks who are currently in a shelter? And I think what that means, there are two different responses to those, to that issue. And so I think really this is the time, if folks haven't done it yet, is to get out there and write to electeds and make sure that they're working harder and faster to get people into those hotels that were approved. You know, last week on Tuesday or Wednesday, the board accepted the funding. This week on Tuesday, they passed the plan to start getting people inside and get people services, people experiencing homelessness. And so we really need to push them, hold their feet to the fire on getting shit done. Like, what the fuck are they doing? We've got people who are outside that are suffering, and now that they know this, like, as this news starts to spread into the community of people who are living outside, that fear that they are currently living with is just going to be magnified.
Right.
And we need to do something about, like, the people that I'm talking to every day have not been approached by anyone with any sort of like community education for people experiencing homelessness. Like, we need to do something to show people that we give a shit. And I say that knowing that this community doesn't give a shit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, you know, I guess I say this every episode now, but it's true. Like, even if you don't give a shit, like, it's self-preservation. Like, because I mean, like, if we have two cases on the books, right, of two folks who are experiencing homelessness who have been hospitalized with COVID-19, that's probably the tip of an iceberg of whatever is happening down at the river or wherever else unhoused folks are congregating. And if those guys have it, this situation continues. You can't, it's not like, you have to care about people who are unhoused dealing with this, because they're part of your community, and this is an issue where community fucking matters to you. You know, like I said, you know, we can all stay in our houses and flatten out the curve, and that's fine. But like, if the folks who are living down at the river come back up from the river with COVID-19, we're all going back in our houses. The whole thing grinds back down to a halt. Nothing is solved. Like, caring for these folks is self-preservation at this point.
Yeah, and for some people, like self-preservation can really motivate people to do shit that they wouldn't otherwise do, right? And so maybe that's the narrative that people need to hold on to for this. Like, if you don't give a shit about people experiencing homelessness, like, this is the time to give a shit about them, because it means that you're actually taking care of yourself.
It sucks that we have to make that argument, but yeah,
right.
it's probably one of the
totally.
most effective.
I think as a socialist, like one of my core beliefs is that as a society, we're only doing as well as the most vulnerable among us, you know, and like I carry that.
Yes.
That's kind of a thing that I believe in general anyway. But all this entire COVID situation is doing is proving that to be exactly right. Like
Right.
this is like obviously it's terrible, but you couldn't ask for a better example of that being like an obvious, unignorable truth.
Oh yeah, and like American capitalism is just. I don't think you could have asked for an event more uniquely designed to lay bare every single fault in what we've been doing. And you know, I guess I like what Shannon said and what Michelle said. The name of the game tonight is contact your elected, lean on them. The county has failed. Olive, be quiet. Sorry, everyone.
Olive's borfing out those action
she's
steps.
Borfing, yeah. She's like, hey, Phil Cerna. No, contact the county, and they, you know, they're the ones that run the funds on serving the homeless community, and they should be moving. Gavin Newsom, I get that he's got a lot going on and like he had priorities and he's obviously not sleeping much and his voice is a little raspier every day, but like now is the time to focus on this one. Now is the time to start moving on this and fast.
And we're not like, so I have been sitting in on the county and the city council meetings specific to the issues around getting folks who are experiencing homelessness inside during this crisis. And the number of people who are submitting public comment on this are under double digits. So like we absolutely, like we need people to show up for this and to they're not reading the public comment during the meetings, but they are reading them prior to, and that is important. Like, even if you just find, you know, a form letter that says, that expresses your passion for making sure, not even passion, your like mild concern for people experiencing homelessness, that is at this point valuable. Yeah. I'll fucking write it for you. Just holla at me. And it will. I won't even.
I will point out that the public comments do not reflect always the number of people who have also emailed and contacted them in other means. Sometimes public comment is an underrepresentation of the number of people who care about or have even weighed in on an issue. But important. Nonetheless, the public comment certainly matters because it allows other people to be able to determine who commented on these things and how much of a groundswell of support there is. So it is important for other people in the same way we've talked about, you know, recognizing the social pressure you can put on people around doing something about this because it impacts you. The same thing is true for like when you see your neighbors doing something, you feel a greater pressure to do it yourself.
Yeah, totally.
Well, we're pushing.
What a show.
Time, so let's start wrapping it up. Michelle, once again, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your expertise with us.
Absolutely.
This is just such an important and stressful and so many things time, and it's always nice to have somebody on who's also fighting the good fight and brings sort of a level of knowledge that on a topic that we don't have.
Yeah, agree.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'm happy to come talk about housing and anytime you want.
Awesome.
Great. Well, we've all got extra time, so maybe again soon.
Well, Dave, speaking of that, I don't know if I've ever said this on the show yet or not, but I'm not working right now, and I have all this time on my hands, right? And I've been using that time recently to delve through the dregs of the internet to find this great voices content that gets me through the day that I crave, but I'm running low, man. And so I wanted to ask you today on the show, if I need more of this fantastic voices content, what do I do? Where do I go?
that is just the question on the tip of everyone's tongue these days.
Truly.
And good luck, or we're all in luck because Voices is all over the place. We have a website, voicesrivercity.com. We've got community essays coming out. I don't have shit to do, so I'm actually doing some reporting on there. We've got the Follow the Money project, which has been a joy to work on. And then, of course, we're on social media, right? We are on Facebook as Voices River City. We're now on Instagram at Voices River City. We have a Patreon, patreon.com/Voices River City. You do not have to pledge if you do not have money right now. It's okay if you don't have money to do it. But if you do have means and if you do want to help us out, we really, really appreciate the community chipping in. You can go as low as $5 a month. So that's a beer that you can't have right now anyway at the bar. So
a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And each one of us is on Twitter. I am at Karen. Wait, Kempa. That's IOUKNOWKEMPA.
I'm Guillotine for you. That's Guillotine, the number 4 YOU.
And I'm Shan N.D. Stevens.
And I'm at Flojaune, FLOJAUNE. But I really wish I was at Karen.
Someone's got that already. Michelle, how can we find you?
Opportunity.
So you know what? I signed up for Twitter like 3 weeks ago because I finally had time to figure out how to do it. But yeah, so you can just search my name, Michelle Pariset, and you'll find me there.
Great.
All right.
Well, thank you everyone for listening. Thank you as always to Be Brave Bold Robot for the sweet, sweet tunes. Anybody have anything else to add?
Do you guys think, is Gavin Newsom getting haircuts right now?
Oh, he's getting haircuts.
You think he's got a hairdresser who's coming over and giving him a safe cut, a COVID safe cut?
The hairdresser is like quarantined with him.
Yeah. He's got
it's
like
his
the
wife,
chef.
I'm hoping.
He's got
You
a
hear that,
chef
Tareen?
and
He lets his wife cut his hair.
Yeah, Tareen. And look,
You
his
hear
hair
that?
looks great.
Okay.
People
looks
remark
great.
on his hair constantly.
There's
That's
like
great.
30 au pair units for like every, like the chef and the haircut person. Yeah.
My addition is I did just look up Michelle's Twitter handle, and it is exactly what she may have thought. Her first and last name at Michelle Pariset.
Nice. I love it. Nice and simple.
All right.
So, thanks for listening, everybody.
Yeah, we will
Yes.
see you on Tuesday.
Cannot wait.
Yes. Can't wait. Bye.
All right, guys.
Bye.
Stay safe. Stay healthy.